Hey guys, this is Chubbs back again with another ACS scripting tutorial, and today we're going to be taking a look at global variables. So if you've kept up with this series, you should already be familiar with what variables are and just how useful they can be. You can store information with them, you can test that information and then take different actions, but one big limit to the variables, at least in the way you've used them so far, is that they only exist on their respective maps. So for example, if you have like a 5-level project, then if you're on level 4, there's no way to look back at or change any of the variables that were on levels 1, 2, or 3. You can only access level 4's variables. With global variables though, as their name implies, they exist globally, so no matter what map you're on, you can always see them and you can change them and do whatever you want with them. So I've set up a little bitty 2-map project here, and I'm going to show you guys how global variables can be used to keep count of how many kills you have, and you can use them for many other purposes, but this is a nice easy way to show just how useful they can be. So we'll go into visual mode here. I'll show you the first map I've made. This is the first of 2 maps. So we have a player start, a rocket launcher, and some ammo, and then we have some keys that have been hung up here, and these are basically going to be our targets. And using global variables, we're going to keep track of how many of these keys we have killed across both levels. So that's it for level 1. Let's go ahead and I'll load up level 2 for you guys. And level 2 is basically more of the same. We have a player start, we have some rockets, and we have some more keys that have been hung up. And these are further away, they're a little harder to hit, but it's sort of like more of like target practice on this level. And don't ask what poor Billy Blaze did to deserve this. I guess I was just being a little evil when I came up with these maps, but that's it for the 2 levels. Like I said, we're going to be keeping track of how many of these guys we have killed. So when we play level 1 and then we get to this level, we want the kill count to remain constant. So if we kill both of the guys on level 1, then when we kill the first one on here, the count should theoretically be at 3 instead of starting at 1. So let's go back to the first level and let's get started. So we'll open up the script editor. Let's go up here, click the open script editor button, and we are starting with a blank slate. So we'll start with the line that we always include first, and that is the £sign or the number sign, include, space, and then inside quotations, zcommon.acs, and I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can read it easier. Then we'll skip a couple lines, and here's where we're going to create our global variable. So in the past, when you've made a variable, like if you wanted a kill counter, you would probably use an integer, and you would just do something like int space kill count, whatever name you wanted, and you could end it there, or you could do equals whatever you wanted it to start at. So that's how you would have made a variable before. Now with a global variable, what you do is you start with the word global, and then you put the type. So global int, since we're going to be counting, we'll just use an integer. And next, instead of typing the name of the variable, you type the index number. Global variables use an index number that is anywhere from 1 to 64. So you can have 64 global variables total. You can't have any more than that. So we're going to start with index 1, since this is going to be our first global variable, and this is the only one we're going to be using. And then you type a colon, as I just did, followed by the name of the variable. So here's where you can enter whatever name you want. So since we're going to be killing keys, and we're going to be keeping track of how many keys we've killed, we're going to name this variable accordingly. We're just going to call this variable keys killed. Then we'll put a semicolon, and that's that. So before I move on, I do want to tell you guys about something peculiar that I've noticed about global variables, and that is that I don't think you can initialize these, at least not the way you normally would. So if we wanted this to, let's say for example, start at like 100, if we do space 100 and we try and compile this, it's going to give us an error whereas if we just don't set it to anything specific, it compiles just fine. And this basically just makes it start at 0. The only way that I've really found to get around this is like if you do a like an open script, and then you do the variable name, and then you initialize it here. This would basically say when the map opens, take the variable and make it 1,000. So it is kind of the same thing, but that is something I've noticed. And since this is a global variable that's accessed across all the maps, in all honesty, I would probably avoid initializing these things to a specific number unless you absolutely had to. But you know, that's something I did want to point out real quick, just in case it confuses any of you guys. But we're going to keep it right like this, and I'm going to recap what we've just done. So I'll compile it again just to make sure. There we go. So we have made a global integer variable. Global is the keyword you have to use. Again, it is an integer. Its index number is 1, and the index number is really the most important thing with global integers. This index number is what keeps them tracked across each map. So when we go over to map 2, which is what we're going to do here in just a little bit, we have to make sure that we use 1 again, because this is basically the big important part. If we were to go to map 2 and type 2, then we would not be able to access that kill counter. We want to make sure that we're using the same index across the maps. And then we have named it Keens Killed. And the colon part you don't have to worry or think too much about. Just make sure you have a colon between the index and the name of the variable. So now that we've created our very own global variable, let's go ahead and let's write a very simple script that will run whenever we kill those Keens. So we'll make this script 1. It'll be a void script. We're not going to do anything special with it as far as like sending it any information. When the script runs, again, this is going to be a script that runs when the Keens are killed. The very first thing we want to do is increase the count. So we're going to take this variable and we're just going to increase it by 1. So we're just going to do Keens Killed ++. Now you could also, if you wanted to, you could do Keens Killed equals Keens Killed +1. That's one way you can do it. You can also do, I think, plus equals 1, but my favorite shorthand way is ++. So this just says take this variable and add 1 to it. Just a nice and simple way to do it. Next, let's go down, and what we want to do is we want to basically print a message that just tells the player how many Keens have been killed in total. So we'll do that with a print statement, and I've already covered the print function in previous videos, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. We'll do print. We'll start with a string. We're going to say Keens Killed, : we'll end the string, and next we want to print the value. So since this is going to be an integer value, we'll do I : Keens Killed. And I'll recap this also. So whenever this script runs, the value of this variable, of the global variable, is increased by 1, and then we're going to print Keens Killed, : followed by the value of Keens Killed. So if we've killed like 3 of them, then this will print Keens Killed 3. Nice and simple. And we are finished as far as the scripting goes. So now that I've recapped it, let's exit out of the script editor. And one last thing we need to do on this level is we need to give these Keens the script execute action. So I'm going to select both of them in thing mode. I'm going to right click one, and we're editing both of them right now. The action that we're going to give them is script execute always. This is the one you're going to want to use almost every time that you're dealing with killing things. You could use script execute, but like if you killed 2 of them in a single blast, then it would not count correctly. When you're killing stuff, script execute always is almost always going to be the best option. I covered this in one of the previous videos, so if you want to go back and watch that, I talk about it in more detail. But we're going to use script execute always, and script number, script 1. That's the only script that we've written. So we've finished with this map. Just a quick little recap. Let me zoom in again. We've created a global variable called Keens Killed, and whenever we kill a keen, we're going to increase it. We're going to tell the player how many have been killed, and that's it. So let's go ahead and test the map real quick, and let's see what we've got so far. So there we go. As you could see, when we killed the keens, the value of the global integer was increased by 1, and then we received a message on the screen that told us what the total kill count was. So thus far, everything that you've seen has been really standard fare. We haven't done anything all that interesting. But what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the second map, and this is where the global variable aspect is going to come into play, because we're going to take this value and we're basically going to carry it over to the second map instead of it just being wiped clean like with a regular variable that you would have used in the past. So since we're going to be doing basically the same exact stuff, instead of writing all this over again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all of this. And so I've copied it right now, and we're going to save our changes on this map, and let's load into the second map. So here we are, map 2. Now, like I said, at least I think I said at the beginning of the video here, each map has its own separate variables and scripts. So now that we're on map 2, if we pull up the script editor, notice it's blank. As far as this map is concerned, we have no variables. There's nothing that we've kept track of. So that's where we have to do our own work in order to keep the count going. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to paste all of that stuff that I copied. We're going to compile just to make sure everything compiled without errors. And as you can see, we're good to go. So now, since we have reused the index of 1, this integer is being maintained across these maps. Now, something else I want to point out is that if we wanted to, we could change the name of this variable on this specific map. And even though the name would be different, since we were using index 1, the count would still be kept. But it's always a good practice with these global variables to keep the names consistent across the maps. Now, again, the index is the main part. You want to definitely keep that. If you don't keep the index correct, then the count is not going to be kept. But the name is not as important, but it is a very good practice to keep the name the same, just to keep things from getting confusing. You don't want to have different names because there's really no good reason for having a different name for this variable on map 2 versus map 1. It just wouldn't make much sense, and it's just not a good idea. So all this is just going to be the same, and I think I already compiled it a second ago. So we're going to keep all of that like it is, not going to make any other changes. What we do need to do, though, is we need to assign these keens the script execute action because they don't have that yet. So I selected all of them just now. I'm going to edit all their properties. We're going to do script execute always again, and script 1 because that's the only script this map has. Click OK, save, and we are really finished. That's all we have to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to test this to make sure that the count is kept across the maps. So let's reload map 1 and let's start testing. And when I kill both of these guys and I flip this exit switch and we go to the next map, the count should be the count should start at 2 instead of starting over at 0. So let's test it and let's see if it works. All right, and it worked perfectly. So as you could see, let's go ahead and load the second map here. When we killed both keens on the first map, and then we arrived at the second map, the instance we killed the first keen on this map, it showed us that the count was 3. So it remembered that we had killed 2 on the last map. And that's where global variables are really powerful and really useful. If we wanted to, we could even go to this map script. Remember that each map has separate scripts, and we could do like a test here to see if we'd killed all the keens. We know that on the first map we have 2 keens, and then on this map we have 3, so the total number of keens is 5. So what we could do is we could throw in a conditional statement when this script runs, and we can say if keens killed, let's say if it's greater than or equal to 5, then let's tell the player all keens killed. And then we're going to say else. So this is basically, this is going to run if we haven't killed them all. If we have not killed all the keens, then it's just going to tell us the typical message of keens killed followed by the current count. So let's run 2 tests on this time. The first test is I'm going to kill them all, and when I kill the very last one, we should see all keens killed. The second test that I run, I'm going to purposely skip one on the first map, and we should only, when we kill the last one on the second map, we should see keens killed 4. So let's go ahead and let's run that test, and let's see how the messages show up. So I compiled it there. Let's go back to the first map. Make sure we save our changes. I was sort of getting ahead of myself. So here we go. We're going to test it. And like I said, we're going to do 2 tests. Test number 1, I'm going to kill them all, make sure that the message shows. Test 2, I'm going to miss one, or I'm going to skip one, and we're going to make sure that that congratulations message is not shown. Okay, so that concludes test 1. You saw the sort of congratulatory message telling you that you killed all the keens. So here's test 2, where I'm going to skip one. Okay, so in that test, as you could see, since I missed one of the keens on the second level when I had killed them all, we did not receive the all keens killed message. So that's just a little example of one way that you could use global variables. Like you could check across all of your maps to see if the player had accomplished like all of a certain objective. And another way that global variables maybe could be used is you could maybe have like a story arc. Like if you have a really large megawatt and a player makes a certain choice early on, you could keep track of what that choice was by using a global variable, and later in your project you could maybe have different things happen according to what choice he made. So anyways, that covers global variables. I hope this helped you guys out. I do want to go here to the ZDoom Wiki real quick and just tell you guys that in addition to global variables, there are also map variables and world variables. And these are, I think, much more situational. Map variables, I'm not really sure what situations those would be useful in. You guys can check this out if you want to on the wiki. But world variables could be very, very useful. These are basically variables that only exist within like a hub or within an episode. So the moment you go to another hub or go to another episode, the variables reset. So they are larger in scope than a regular variable, but they don't span like the entire game like a global variable would. Something else that I noticed when I was looking at these is that whereas global variables have a limit of 64, the world variables, which are the ones that are like across hubs or episodes, have a limit of 256. So you can have more of those. But I did want to also mention those variables as well. I think global variables are probably the most useful, probably the ones that would be most practical for most people, but who knows, maybe some of you guys will get some use out of the map variables and the world variables. But I think that concludes this tutorial. Hope this helped you guys out. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. If you have any questions about global variables at all, feel free and comment below. And thanks to everybody for watching. This is Chubbs signing out.